غرباء 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 غرباء.
الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسولنا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, my dear respected brothers and sisters. Firstly, Jazakallah khairan to Ustadh Abu Ibrahim for giving us his time, and Jazakallah khairan for you brothers and sisters attending this event, sacrificing your times from your studies. A brief intro about Ustadh Abu Ibrahim. He has completed his LMU course and has an Islamic diploma and master's in Islamic studies. He is a lecturer of Arabic and Islamic studies. He is also an imam, khatib, and regularly delivers sermons, lectures in mosques, universities, and colleges and community organizations throughout the UK. He has over a decade of experience in dawah and education, speaking on issues related to society, especially the youth and the Muslim community and family. He is currently a teacher at Islamic Academy in London and is completing a PhD in Islamic law. Without further ado, I would like to allow Ustadh Abu Ibrahim to begin his lecture on the effects of sins.
Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil anbiya wal mursalin nabiyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluhu sallallahu alayhi wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Amma ba'd. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, which means peace and blessings upon each and every one of you, and welcome to our guests. First and foremost, we praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as Allah is deserving of all praise, and we send peace and blessings upon His final messenger Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. I want to thank the ISoc for inviting me here today, and Jazakumullah khair, and Jazakumullah khair to each and every one of you for attending. I don't actually know this song, I can't tell. It's okay, hi, alhamdulillah. As for the topic, inshallah ta'ala, I've been asked to speak about today, it's the effects of sins. No doubt it's a topic that is related to the personality, the individual personality, regards to how we conduct ourselves, the actions that we do, and ultimately accountability. Because first and foremost we need to appreciate what is a sin. I think before we talk about the effects of sin, what is a sin? And Islamically, when we look at the issue of sins, we are as Muslims obliged to do certain acts, deeds, and so on. And in some cases, the actions that we're asked to do is something that is known as obligatory, means something that you've been commanded to do. For example, an example is to pray. So in this instance, what would happen is Allah will ask you to pray, or you would have text that religiously tells you to pray, and you would have to do this. So to abstain from praying at this occasion would be a sin, because you're asked to do something and you leave it. So that's one way of being sinful. Another form of being sinful is, for example, where you're told to stay away from something, which is nahi in Arabic, which is nahi. And for example, to drink alcohol. Now, for a Muslim, we can't drink alcohol, so the one who drinks alcohol, because he's gone to something that has been prohibited from, he becomes sinful. And these are the two scales that we're looking at when it comes to what is a sin. Now, it's important for us to define the fact that the sins we're talking about in this lecture, in essence, is the sin that we have been told to leave from our texts and our source and so on. Because it's important. First and foremost, we have to appreciate we live in a multicultural society where there are many different faiths, cultural practices, and so on. So, where we see a Muslim is drinking alcohol, we see it sinful. When we see a non-Muslim drinking alcohol, we can't see it as being in the same light sinful, because the person doesn't judge themselves or regulate their actions according to what we think is sinful, if you understand. Because it's quite important for us to understand this first and foremost, because we've had episodes where Muslims have gone out, in effect, to command good and forbid evil, to people where they're doing actions which is not sinful according to their belief, their ideology, or what is accepted even in society. For example, to gamble or to drink, in this case. Though, between religions, there is a sense of morality. Nobody, even in the UK, alhamdulillah, I haven't seen it today, walks around naked. We may say part naked or so on, but actually fully in the nadi, as they say, there's no one out there at the moment. And because there's a moral ground, there's so much freedom that we can take. and accept without infringing upon somebody else's freedom and so on. So the sins we're talking about as Muslims, it's important for us brothers and sisters to understand, is that what we have been told by legislation, by the way of the Quran and the Sunnah of the Messenger Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and what the scholars, by delving into our sources, have come back to us and told us, stay away from this. Do you understand? Do you understand this principle first and foremost? Also, that then what we find is between us as Muslims, there's degrees of what we think is sinful. And there's even ikhtilaf, which is difference between us, what is sinful. For example, for some Muslims, even brothers, to be in the presence of Muslim sisters without niqab, you know, the sisters are sinful because they should be covering their faces. Yet, if you find on the other spectrum, other people will say, no, it's not a sin. Islamically, there's two valid arguments there. So on this occasion, we say this is ikhtilaf, difference of opinion. Let the person practice what they think is more closest to the truth. More closest to the truth. But to drink alcohol, rarely would you find, even the most moderate Muslims say, drinking alcohol is something permissible. Because of the fact that it's something clear-cut. And we know the ill effects of alcohol. Even when I speak to, for example, non-Muslims, and we talk about the ill effects of alcohol, they agree. They say one of the worst things the government done in this country was to increase the alcohol or drinking hours. It used to be 11 o'clock, now you can go all through the night and so on. And it hasn't made the situation any better for society. So even non-Muslims would agree on this issue that alcohol has this sort of effect. So I don't think amongst Muslims there would be ikhtilaf or there's this difference that drinking alcohol is a sin. I don't think so. So it's important we need to understand this. What is it that I'm trying to tell you, in what perspective am I trying to give you, and what is the nut, in the end, the nutshell that I'm trying to give you, inshallah. Basically, we are here as Muslims, we're obliged by Allah Azza wa Jal from our religious teaching to follow a certain way of life. And what we want is to go through life in a way that we're able to reap the benefits and to stay away from harm. And ultimately benefit in a way that we benefit in the dunya, but this benefit continues for us so that when we end up, because we believe in a hereafter and akhirah, that we are also reaping the benefits of our actions here. Because the alternative is that you are in some ways cancelling out this benefit, bringing harm upon yourself here. You harm yourself as you tread the life, this dunya, the world, and then when you reach the other end you find out, oh no, the cause of all of these actions that I did, the effect is that I ended up being punished in the hereafter. So that is how a Muslim should look at the topic of sin. So when we look to the book of Allah Azza wa Jal, one of the things, and you're familiar with your Quran, I hope, inshallah ta'ala, yes? After Al-Fatiha, what is the surah that we find? Al-Baqarah. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Alif Lam Mim Dhalika al-Kitab la rayba fi hudan lil muttaqin. Look to the way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala starts off with the book Al-Quran. We find Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, this is the book that there is no doubt thereof. And it is a book of guidance for who? Al-Muttaqin. So if we find our source, we go to our source, the Quran, after Al-Fatiha, which is like a dua, it's a supplication. The first chapter of the Quran, Al-Fatiha, is a supplication. You ask Allah to guide you and to keep you upon the right path, not to be misguided, not to be angry upon you. You remember all of this, yes? You remember all of this, yes? You start off saying this, and then you open the book for further guidance, and Allah says, this is the book, there is no doubt in thereof, and it's a book of guidance for Al-Muttaqin. So when you start off reading this source, this is our source as Muslims, Allah has told you, start off with the pretense that there is no misguidance in this. What you hear and you read from this is going to give you benefit, and it's going to keep you away from harm. Okay? Then Allah talks about the type of people. There's those type of people, believing people. There's those type of people, disbelieving people. And there's another category which I call hypocritical people, hypocrites, that what they do, they profess to believe, but because inside their heart is a disease, they don't truly believe in Allah, or they don't truly trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or they don't truly believe in the message, that what they do is they practice, but they have this sort of disease in their heart, which causes them to be called hypocrites. And the hypocrites are punished even more in the eyes of Allah Azza wa Jal than the disbelievers. They are in fact in the lowest part of the hellfire. So Allah tells you all of this before you read all of the other stories that come. But the reason I'm mentioning this is because we're talking about sin. And even amongst the religions, Islam, Christianity, Judaism, we find those heavenly revealed religions, there is a common story to all. The story of the creation of man. And in fact, we find in our Quran very early on, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions this story. Now, why? Because we want to know what is the effect of sin, yes? We want to know what happens if you are someone sinful. Allah starts very simply and very straightforward in the first story, because Allah talks about the sifat of the type of people and then goes into this narrative, and the narrative that Allah talks about is Adam and Satan. Now, only the other day, I don't know if you watched TV or so, over the weekend they were debating, does Satan really exist? And there was a lot of theological talk about this, because I know even as Muslims we're prone to blame our actions upon Satan or the devil. We're prone to do this rather than account ourselves. But in the end, regards to how the Satan affects you, that's a different topic. But in the beginning, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us there's this story about these two types of being. One, which is man, Adam, the first man, and then we have Satan, who's Iblis, from amongst the spirit kind. And look to this. The story starts off that Allah creates Adam, and then there is an amr. What did we say was an amr? Is an obligation to do, is it not? It is an obligation to do. So as an action, Allah will ask you to do an action that is an obligation to do. If you don't do this, what are you? Sinful. If you don't do this action, then you're sinful. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He said to the Malaika and Iblis, Usjudu li Adam. Why don't you prostrate towards Adam? Because Allah created Adam, and the narrative is, the story is such that the angels, they see this marvelous creation that Allah creates, and then Allah says to the angels, prostrate to Adam. And Allah says to Iblis, who is in the company, prostrate to Adam. Allah then says, فَسَجَدُوا إِلَّا إِبْلِيسَ أَبَى وَاسْتَكْبَرَ وَكَانَ مِنَ الْكَافِرِينَ. Allah says that all of the creation at that time, they prostrated to Adam, because it's the commandment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Except Iblis, the Satan. He became proud and haughty. Proud and haughty. And then Allah says, وَكَانَ مِنَ الْكَافِرِينَ. Then he became amongst those who are disbelievers. Now, Allah says this in the very beginning, though even at that time there are no disbelievers. All are in the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Iblis is the one who turns down one commandment. What is that commandment? To prostrate to Adam. He doesn't do this, so Allah says he has become a disbeliever. Now the disbeliever here is to be ungrateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to reject, to want to obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to know that Allah exists and Allah commands you to do something, and then what do you do? To deny this commandment. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says this because Allah says, look, this is, we think the original sin is what? That Adam, he ate from the tree, yes? But there's someone who did sin before him, the Satan. Likewise, when we look to the story of Adam, in the same situation, Allah Azza wa Jalla says to Adam, Uskun anta wa zawjaka al-jannata wa kula minha ragadan haythu shi'tuma wa la taqraba hadhihi shajarata fatakuna min adh-dhalimin. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then says to Adam, in this same sort of narrative that is going on, even after the Satan has been disobedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that, oh Adam, I created you, I put you in paradise. Paradise with who? With his wife. And you can eat from there whatever you wish. And then Allah does what is known as nahi. He does one prohibition. وَلَا تَقْرَبَ هَذِهِ الشَّجَرَةِ. But then don't go towards this tree. فَتَكُونَ مِنَ الظَّالِمِينَ. Because if you are to go towards this tree, then what would happen? You become a wrongdoer. Dhulm, from the oppressor. And in Islam we believe that the one who does the oppression oppresses others by not giving them their rights or taking away their rights. And you oppress yourself by not doing what is the right thing. So look to this. When Adam alayhi salam, he ate from the tree, and Hawa as well ate from the tree, it was something that they were tempted to do. Temptation. Something that they were tempted to do. Because Satan was still around. He tempted them to do, but they ate from the tree. Now, what happened after that? Allah Azza wa Jalla saw this as a sin because it's going against His commandment. Going against His commandment. And this commandment in this case is to stay away from something that is prohibited. But look to the reaction. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that the reaction, once they realized they'd done something wrong, because they were deluded to go and eat from this forbidden tree, what did they do? They turned back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. رَبَّنَا ظَلَمْنَا أَنفُسَنَا وَإِن لَّمْ تَغْفِرْ لَنَا وَتَرْحَمْنَا لَنَكُونَ مِنَ الْخَاسِرِينَ. They're the ones that turn back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and they said, oh Allah, we have done wrong. And if you don't forgive us, then we're amongst the losers. Can you see the difference in the reaction? Iblis, he's told, do an action. He doesn't do it. He's sinful because he doesn't do an action. And then after that, Allah chastised Satan by saying, look, he's amongst those who are ungrateful, disobedient. And on the other hand, we find Adam and Eve, they eat from the forbidden tree. They realize, even though they've been duped into doing this, and then they turn back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Did both of them remain in paradise? Tell me. Even though one was ungrateful, haughty, disobedient, whereas the others, they were duped, but then they turned back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Did Allah keep them both or any of them in paradise? No. Because both were sinful. Allah punished them both. Allah punished them both and put them both upon the earth. Both upon the earth. But Satan, he says, let me live upon the earth till the end of time so that I can continue to tempt mankind. Give me the respite. Allah said, yes, you want this respite? You can have this. Here we talk about the existence of Satan and the influence upon man because it's something sorted. Whereas for Adam and Eve, Allah Azza wa Jalla says something different. وَلَكُمْ فِي الْأَرْضِ مُسْتَقَرٌّ وَمَتَاعٌ إِلَيْهِ. But for you, there is something else. You're just going to roam upon the earth. You're just going to mustaqar, mean you're just going to roam, be here, there, and so on. That's what human beings do, don't they? They live on the earth, they roam and they move, they try to find better grounds and so on. But then Allah says, فَمَنْ تَبِعَ هُدَايَ فَلَا خَوْفٌ عَلَيْهِمْ وَلَا هُمْ يَحْزَنُونَ. But then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then says, but the one who follows my guidance, فَلَا خَوْفٌ عَلَيْهِمْ وَلَا هُمْ يَحْزَنُونَ. But for the one who follows my guidance, what will happen? There will be no hope. What does mankind fear? Mankind fears, what is the greatest fear of mankind? What do you fear? Can't find a wife. Inshallah, one day. One day. The sisters, what do they fear? Mr. Right. No. Muhammad Right, inshallah. We'll find someone like that. But what do we really fear? Death. We all fear death, don't we, inshallah? This is what we fear. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, look, there's no hope upon the one who follows the guidance. وَلَا هُمْ يَحْزَنُونَ. And again, they will not grieve on the day of judgment because they know if they follow the Lord, then Allah will please and Allah will reward them. That means for the brothers and sisters who don't get married in the dunya, inshallah ta'ala, you will have a spouse in the Jannah, inshallah ta'ala. Pray Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ameen. But what is the point of me telling this story? Because look, human nature is that we will err. If the best of creation, at the time, Adam alayhi salam, Allah wouldn't create the first human being defective, would He? He would make it perfect, because that's the nature of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But Allah teaches us a lesson. Allah teaches us a lesson that what mankind has weakness. Brothers and sisters, men and women, we have this weakness in us. But there is a mechanism. Realize that you've done wrong. Turn back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, rectify yourself, and in the end you get that reward that you wanted. Because Adam and Eve, what did they enjoy? They enjoyed being in paradise. But they done wrong, Allah punished them and said, you're only there for a short while, and you can only enjoy the earth for a short while. And then you turn back. And we all fear what? Death we do fear. Kullu nafsin dhaikatul maut. Because Allah said this is a guarantee. You know, I'm someone with a scientific background. Studied all of the stuff about cells and physics and biology. So, and up to this day, no man, no woman, no one with their intelligence can, defy death in the end of the day. They can go as far as the moon, maybe even go to Mars or something, but in the end you can't run away from death. Death is a reality. Kullu nafsin dhaikatul maut. Thumma ilayna turja'un. But then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says what? You're going to return back to me. And this is the thing that a lot of people are worried about. What state am I going to turn back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Well, you're on a head start if one of the things that you do is to reduce all your sins before you go. Umar al-Khattabi was someone very shrewd from amongst the companions of the Prophet ﷺ. He said, "Hasibu anfusakum qabla an tahasab." Hasibu anfusakum qabla an tahasab. He said, account yourself before you're counting. And he's someone, we know he is amongst the greatest of the companions of the Prophet ﷺ. He's someone that the Prophet ﷺ said, Umar fil Jannah. Umar, you are going to be someone who's going to be in paradise. Even with the guarantee of the Prophet ﷺ, Umar would always account his life. look to where he's doing something wrong and try to rectify himself. And in fact, one of the things that he would do is someone who is kind of strange in the sense he would like to torture himself, just to make sure he stays humble. Omar used to do this, Omar used to do this, because people used to praise Omar. When Omar used to walk around and say, "Yeah, Omar, you're the great Omar. Omar, you walk on one side of the road and the Satan walks on the other side when he sees you." This is how people used to see Omar. This is the father of Omar bin Khattab. But Omar would be someone, he wouldn't take this and accept this. Rather, he would go back and he would say, Omar used to do this and so, just to remain humble and, down to earth. In fact, one of the things he would say is that if only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was to accept one of my sujood, when we prostrate to God, he said, if only I was to know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accepted one of my sujood. Yet we know as believers, one of the first things that we're asked about on the Day of Judgment is what? The prayer. And he's asking, if I knew only, subhanAllah, if Allah accepted one of these things. Because he wants to be close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the effect of sin, the bigger picture of the effect of sin is that we may be in the moment, we may be in the zone, and sometimes we could be deluded ourselves. We could be deluded ourselves. I mean, I go to many Islamic talks, and I give a talk maybe on marriage or family life and so on. And maybe along the line I would mention, for example, Islam doesn't allow boyfriend and girlfriend. Free mixing is a different thing, but to have a boyfriend and girlfriend, someone specific for yourself, that you share those intimate moments, Islam doesn't allow. There'll be people that they pray and so on, sisters that cover and so on. And you just drop the penny and leave it, because you just think no one's going to pay attention to that point. You'd be surprised afterwards that I'll have a queue of people. Sheikh, what do I do? I've got a girlfriend. Sheikh, there's this brother. Sister would say, there's this brother. So. What do I do in this case? And I say, subhanAllah, at least you took stock of the situation that you're in at the moment. Islam said it's not allowed. Islam said not allowed. So what do you do? And I'll give them the alternative. Because in the end, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows there's a fitrah between us. There's this connection between man and woman and so on. In fact, it's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put Adam in. But the fact is, what do we have to do? We have to try to see the bigger picture. See the bigger picture. And the bigger picture is that what we want to stay away from the harm, from the sins that we have, and we want to reap the benefit. And eventually, when we go to meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we want the mizan, our scales, to be in the favor of us, getting the reward, and inshallah entering paradise. That's what we want. So what is the effect of sin? The effect of sin, firstly, is to recognize sin first. Before you can understand the effect of the sin, you need to recognize that you are being sinful. Now, this can be quite difficult. It can be quite difficult. Because the things that we consider in Islam to be sinful, from a human perspective, is enjoyable. I'll give you an example. Zina, which we call adultery, yes? We call it adultery, which is to have a relationship outside of marriage and so on. It's called zina. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says clearly in the Quran, وَلَا تَقْرَبُوا الزِّنَا. He said, don't go towards zina. And zina is to have an illicit sexual relationship. Though Islam, like I said, don't get this confused with the issue of free mixing, genders being together, cooperating, working together, women being in the public sphere. This is not the same topic at all. What I'm talking about is the illicit relationship. I have to explain why. But usually when people are in that moment, and people do commit zina, people do have an adulterous relationship outside of marriage, people do this because bodily there is a desire there. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, He put this innate in us. Zuyina linnas hubbu shahwa minan nisa. Rarely we put in amongst mankind, there's this desire for women. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says this. It is what is known as the natural instinct. Allah puts this instinct in you. But the Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, Az-zawaj min sunnati. He said, but marriage is from my tradition. And the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, we know he had 9 wives. We are allowed to have even 9 wives. The scholars say we're only allowed to have 4. Though they found some brother, mashallah, in Africa, he's got 86 wives just the other day. We give him udhr bil jahl. We give him the excuse of ignorance, maybe, inshallah. Because maybe he doesn't know the scholars and so on. But this is what we find. This is what we find. So the issue is, so people will do this. Not because, for example, it harms them in any way. People find a benefit, this companionship, this satisfaction. Okay. So they find the satisfaction. So the sin people that will do that they will do is not necessarily going to be something that people are going to see in a negative light. For example, even to steal and rob. I teach a lot of children in a madrasa and so on. And you will be surprised by the type of mentality that they come with. They come to learn Quran, which is the words of God, in the most beautiful language, Arabic and so on, with meaning and so on. And whilst they're there, I would hear them whispering and they're saying, do you know so-and-so jacked someone? 8, 9, 10-year-olds. This is the mentality. Jack. And I said, oh, are you talking about a friend, Jack? So I ordered, no, Chef, no, Ustadh, don't worry about what we're talking about. Then I said, no, I hope you're not talking about stealing and robbing and mugging, because Islam doesn't condone this sort of action. There's no, Chef. Then one of them would come and after would realize, Chef, you know what he said? There is this boy who's been doing this and this. And I said, what do you think about this? He said, that's not right. I said, what does it do? He jacks. I said, what does jack mean? Tell me what jack means. It means he just takes stuff from other people. And I said, give me an example. He goes, iPhone 5. This guy one day doesn't have an iPhone 5. He sees this other guy's got it. He may have a bullet from him, or even just steal it, pickpocket. And they got that. So I said, what do you think about that? He said, it's wrong. I said, you definitely feel it's wrong? He goes, yes, but because the youth, they do this. And I said, well, as long as you feel it's wrong, you stand by your principle. Okay? Because your mum and dad, they send you to us in the madrasa so that you learn these principles. Society may give you certain principles, and by following peer pressure, you follow this line and so on, but in the end, we have Islamic morals and principles. This is why your parents, on top of you coming here to learn the Quran, they want you to understand what the Quran, the principles that the Quran gives. Now you may think, oh, that's for children. My neighbor, who's an English lady, a Christian lady, I was speaking to her the other day only because, unfortunately, one of our neighbors actually got robbed. And I know it was horrific for us because normally you think you live in a lovely estate and you think no harm can come to you. Everyone knows everyone, because even though we live in this cosmopolitan city and so on, alhamdulillah, where the part of London I'm from, I try to make a point, and the neighbours are quite good. We have this sort of old-fashioned values where we look after each other and so on, and regardless of religion and so on, we all look after and so on. So when this happened, it was a bit of a shock. She came down to speak to me and said, did you hear about so and so? And she was concerned for us. I said, I didn't, so it's quite shocking. And then I said to her, I can't understand, for example, the mentality of how a person could want to break into somebody's house, violate somebody's privacy, property, and so on. And in amongst this, want to take away the possession and go away. I just can't understand how somebody can want to do that. Now, excuse me for being naive, okay? I've not lived in the hoods, okay? Everyone thinks sheikhs come from the hoods. I haven't, alhamdulillah. My parents, they put me for a different style of life, alhamdulillah, education and so on and so forth. So I don't understand the hood mentality and so on. So I asked my neighbor this, and she said, do you know why this person done this? There's got to be another cause behind this. It is maybe because the person's on hard drugs, class A drugs and so on. So they have this habit to feed. And she's quite good because she works in the community. So they have this habit to feed and so on. But what happens is they start off on something soft, they go into harder drugs, and it gets to the point to feed this habit, what do? They'll do anything. They'll rob and steal and so on. They'll rob and steal and so on. And I've seen people go down this downhill spiral when they get to that zone. And I said, but I still can't understand why they would do it. She goes, you've just never been there. She says, when they get to that point where they're so addicted to drugs and so on, they're at this point, and she hesitated to tell me what it was. She's a Christian lady, she hesitated. So I said, is it because what you want to tell me is now going to be a spiritual answer? She goes, yes. What I want to tell you is going to be a bit spiritual. I said, I'm all for it. Tell me why. If it's a spiritual answer that you got, I want to hear from you. She said, basically they get to a zone where it's like they've opened a door of darkness, they've gone to another region, and what you see in the reality of this world, they don't see. They're in a totally different zone. And it's like a place, very dark place, very difficult to get out from this one. I saw a lot of common ground there. Because, subhanAllah, we've been told what a sin is. One of the examples we were told, and this is like an example given by one of the companions of the Prophet ﷺ, to explain how a sin works. Sin is, remember, something that you do which is prohibited in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And what would happen, the companion picked up his hand like this and he said, imagine this is your qalb, your heart. Every time you sin, what happens? There's a little black spot on the heart. And it remains there. Until you remember to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for forgiveness, istighfar. So you say, oh, Allah forgive me. So what happens? Allah cleanses. But what happens, some people, what they do one sin, leads to another sin, leads to another sin, and then what happens, it gets to the point where the heart becomes so black. Again, this is just an example to explain how sin works. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts a ran, which is like a covering over the heart. When a person had sinned so much that there is a ran over the heart, what happened? That person is really in trouble at that time. It's almost like a point of no return. The ran in Islamic terms is almost accountable to kufr, I mean almost denying that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala exists. When a person reaches that sort of level, it's like almost a point of no return. But still there's hope. There's still hope. In Islam we believe there's hope because you're supposed to turn back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When you turn back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what will happen? Allah makes it easy for you. So what was I saying? I was saying that people, they will indulge themselves in sins not because they see any harm in it. Not even drinking alcohol. Many Muslims in the area that I'm from, they drink alcohol. And you know, you think, subhanAllah, Muslim boys, yes? It's like the bottle of vodka you find in the morning as you walk into the mosque. It's not the local tramp and so on. It's just some of the brothers. They come out on the night. They sit there in their car. They drink the vodka. They finish and they're gone. That's what it is. That's what is happening. So why do they do this? They think they're having fun. They think they're becoming free-spirited and so on. So people will do sin not because they feel there's a harm in it, but they have this other appreciation of it. They won't see it as sin. So what is important for us is to understand is that you have to recognize you're in a state of sin. You have to. And sometimes it may come from something horrific, maybe an experience that changes you, or it may be, for example, someone advises you. It could be in many different ways. But you have to recognize that you sin. Now, like I said, the sin is the thing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala not to be pleased with. I'll give you an example. If to get a ticket, parking ticket, sin or not sinful? It's not sinful. To get a parking ticket is not sinful. To do a red light, sinful or not sinful? Haram. It is sinful. Because you're going to cause harm to. So we have certain principles. To do a red light is sinful. For what reason? Because you could cause harm to others. You get a ticket, parking ticket, so on, you've harmed yourself. But in the end of the day, Allah is not going to account for that. Can you see? It's what is going to be there on the day of judgment. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to ask you about it, inshallah. So, once you recognize the sin, and like I said, the sin is very broad. Like I said, like we mentioned in the beginning, did we not? That some brothers consider that if a sister is not got niqab on, it can be sinful. And likewise, sisters can think brothers who don't have a beard are sinful. And I would say these are not major issues. These are not major issues that we're talking about the clear-cut things. And what are the clear-cut things? There are many clear-cut things, inshallah. Let's talk a little bit about the effect that they have when you go down these clear-cut things. First and foremost, kibr. Kibr is known as pride. This is the thing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala charged Satan with. Is that not what he said? Fastakbara. When Satan didn't bow to Adam, the sin that was identified was kibr. Now, a lot of people, they don't understand what kibr is. Kibr, the Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, is batrul haq wa ghamdun nas. The kibr, the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam explained, is two aspects. Batrul haq. Batrul haq means to reject the truth. So someone comes and tells you the truth, obviously this is from the religious perspective, and you reject this. That is one aspect of kibr. And another one is to ghamdun nas. Ghamdun nas is to look down upon the people. Two things, because this is the sin that Satan did. Rejected the truth, which was to bow down to Adam. And then to look down upon Adam, because Adam was different from him. Both of these were the sin. Combine them into what we can call it pride, but it's not the sort of pride that you associate with, for example, like patriotism or something. It's not that sort of pride. In Islam, it's a different type of pride where you reject Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and you look down upon the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is one of the aspects. Now, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that this is what Satan had. And this is the thing, one of the main sins that we need to avoid, that we have kibr. Kibr can come in many different forms. Kibr can come because, for example, I'll give you an example. MashaAllah, we have revival of Islamic knowledge at the moment with the Ummah, the youth are really studying and so on, yes? I've seen this, you come to halakat like this, and these are sort of opportunities, for example, the elders never had. Elders never had. So, one of the things that can happen is, you, because you're enlightened now, the knowledge and so on, you can go and you will speak to one of the elders, and we know our elders, basically, they follow what the imams told them, and a lot of the times, a lot of the practice is kind of superstitious, is it not? It's not based upon any real knowledge. We know this, yes? So maybe what will happen, you will go with the truth, what you believe is the truth, and you will go and say to them, you know, uncle, because we speak in the nicest term, uncle, you know this and that. And maybe often, sometimes you might say, this is not allowed Islamically, because, and you may even use a nice term like it's bid'ah. Bid'ah means innovation. You don't say haram, prohibited, sinful. You just say, but you may use nice term like this just to explain an action. What will happen? The person will not take anything from you. Kibr. Firstly, you're not Maulana sir. Okay? The number of times I get called into a situation because got the title Maulana sir, yes? Yet the person asking me is the same age, maybe studied many years ago. But say, no, Maulana sir, you have to come, because to speak to an elder, you have to be a cleric. So that's one aspect. Okay? And the other thing is, look down upon people, not because of color or so on, but because of age. You young man, how can you tell me anything in the religion? Subhanallah. But this wasn't the way of the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So this is one thing that we need to avoid, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, فَمَنْ تَبِعَ هُدَايَ فَلَا خَوْفٌ عَلَيْهِمْ وَلَا هُمْ يَحْزَنُونَ. Whoever follows the guidance, he doesn't have any fear, he doesn't have any grief. So this is one of the things that we need to avoid from when it comes to the sin. The other thing that we need to try to avoid also is like I said, we need to make sure what we do is the obligation Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asks us to do, and stay away from the prohibition. But the prohibition is sometimes takes more priority. The reason being is the effect of doing a sin is something that can cause you more harm than to leave an obligation. Allah will maybe make an obligation, make an excuse. I'll give you an example, like you didn't pray all of your prayers. We know that's the first thing we're asked for, is it not? Yes? But look to this, we've got a narration that Allah will say to the angels that Allah is fully aware of the person's situation. Allah doesn't need someone to bring down a scroll and to say Allah knows everything about the person. But look to how Allah deals with the son of Adam or the daughter of Adam. He will say to the angels, tell me about this person's prayer. Okay. Is it lacking in any way? And then the angel will say, yes, this servant of yours has prayer which is lacking. What would Allah do then? Then Allah will say, but look to see if he's done any voluntary prayers. I mean, not the obligatory ones. And cover those that were obligatory. See how Allah does this. Okay? Allah will make an excuse. Whereas for the prohibition, if you were to do something haram, obviously firstly what you've done is you violated one of the things that, one of the rights of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is to stay away from prohibition. But also what you could have done is what? Affected somebody else. Yes? Taken somebody's right. So the scholars, they say that if you've done a sin, that's great, you ask God for forgiveness and so on, but if you've taken anybody's right, what should you do? Give back that right. And what do I mean? Sometimes, we know how our communities are. We can take land away from people without any right, wealth away from people without any right. Take a lot of rights away from people, yes? You can ask for forgiveness when you realize you've done wrong, but in the end, Islam says you have to give that back. But if you don't give this back, what happens? What happens? The Prophet ﷺ said that the two people, they will be destined for the paradise, but they will be at the gates of paradise, and they will stop at the gates of paradise for what reason? So that they can resolve their disputes. Only one, subhanAllah, that's beautiful, isn't it? Resolve their dispute so that no one goes into paradise with any grievance. So the other thing that we want to try to do is ensure that we stay away from the prohibition. And this is why the Prophet ﷺ said, Innal halal bayin, but innal haram bayin. The lawful is clear, and the unlawful or the prohibited is clear as well. And the only way you're going to know this, my dear Muslim, is to learn this. It's something that you have to learn, inshallah. And the final point I want to mention, are we short on time at the moment? I don't really know. How are we doing for time? 10 minutes, okay, inshallah. Let me come to it. And the other thing that we need to appreciate is that the lawful and the prohibited, if you do that sort of sin, it doesn't just affect you. It doesn't just affect you. It can have consequences that goes beyond you. It can affect your family. It can affect your further community. and we hear this from the Prophet ﷺ as well, that there is a man, and we all know how important dua is for us, yes? Supplication is for us, subhanAllah. I mean, we were told, إِذَا سَأَلْتَ فَسَلِ اللَّهِ وَإِذَا اسْتَعْنَتَ فَاسْتَعِنْ بِاللَّهِ. If you ask Allah, and if you seek help, then seek help from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, a main aspect of our religion is to make the supplication. And that's why parents, they make supplication for their children, and children should do likewise for their parents. But the Prophet ﷺ gives this example of a man from the previous nation. That what he did was, he went out, and obviously he's quite comfortable in the life that he has. Allah blessed him with children, family, business, and so on. But he is grateful to Allah, and he's making dua, supplication. Now, whilst he's making supplication, the Prophet ﷺ said, look to this man. He's making supplication, he's doing it in the right manner by raising the hand to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But then the Nabi ﷺ said, well, look to him. وَمَطْعَمُهُ حَرَامٌ. But the type of food that he's eating is haram. وَمَشْرَبُهُ حَرَامٌ. But the way that he drinks and the things that he's drinking is haram. Means unlawful. وَمَلْبَاسُهُ حَرَامٌ. And the clothing that he's wearing is prohibited. وَقُضِيَ بِالْحَرَامِ. And the way that he nourishes and looks after himself and his family is all prohibited. Subhanallah. Then the Prophet ﷺ said, how can this person then be responded to by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Now the scholars, they say about this, what the Prophet ﷺ said regarding this hadith, and the scholars, they said about this is that not that the man was choosing to eat unlawful food. For example, what is an unlawful food for the Muslims? Burger King. Now you can go to Mecca, it's halal as well. Pork, mashallah. Yes, pork. And a drink, what is an unlawful drink? Alcohol, yes. Unlawful clothing. Miniskirts for men. Okay, let's just say that. And you can do whatever you want in your bedroom, but in public it's different. Okay? So all of these sort of things. So the scholars are saying here is not that the man, he chose outright to drink or eat or wear haram prohibited things, because the man is knowledgeable enough. Allah blessed him with stuff. But what he was doing is the way that he lived his life, the way that he earned his money, the way that he spent that unlawfully earned money on his family and so on, all has consequences. It can't be that you do one aspect halal and another aspect haram and you think it's not going to have any effect. Not going to have an effect. I'll give you an example. For example, we mentioned alcohol many times over is haram, yes. So to deal in alcohol, what do you think? Haram or halal, what do you think? To deal in alcohol. Obviously, we said drinking is not allowed, but to deal, to sell it, what do you think? Haram, yeah. This is the general opinion amongst us. But we will find there's people who will have restaurants where they sell alcohol. Okay, I'll give it to them that they have a fatwa or whatever opinion that they follow. But generally, we know that alcohol, even non-Muslims agree, leads to more chaos and harm than any benefit. But we can find people that what they will do is this. They will have a restaurant, they will sell and earn money from selling alcohol and so on, and they will have a lovely home, and this man may even be an executive or a trustee of a mosque, because Allah bestowed him money, and we know he will give amply to the mosque and many. You think that has no consequences? Many of the time I met people like this, that they do this. They're very happy to donate to the mosque and so on, because they have wealth given to them like that. But what they find is the consequences. The children. They can't control their children. The children are disobedient to them. Okay? The children go wayward. Find this many ways. Do you know why? Because children, alhamdulillah, Allah made them innocent in that sense. They're very astute. They know exactly. For example, I drive the car, and if I hum a ditty, as they say, a bit of nasheed or something, or a tune, my daughter will say, haram, stop it, daddy. Your singing is awful. Probably more awful than anything else. So she would say, stop it, the haram, you've given us earache and so on. But they have this concept, yeah? The principle is very clear for them, so on. Likewise, this man has children, he sends them to madrasa, they're taught something about the Maulana and so on, and the Imam, and they come back and they see their father is doing all of these things. It causes this sort of clash, of values and principles and so on. So the Prophet ﷺ said, there will be an effect. And that's why the man, when he does his dua, oh Allah bless my children, make them obedient to me, is not going to happen. It's not going to happen. Why? Because he's doing all those things to prevent it. He's doing all those things in the way to prevent it. That's why the Prophet ﷺ taught us a principle that, you don't just have trust in Allah alone. Okay? Rather tie your camel their trust in Allah to make sure that camel doesn't go anywhere. That's how we should do it when it comes to Pakistan religion. So it can have a far-ranging effect, the consequent swings, not to ourselves, but also to others. And the other thing is, the last point I want to say, inshallah ta'ala, that was a very big topic. And if I haven't touched upon anything, inshallah, we will allow a bit of Q&A, yes, so we can discuss specifically what you want, inshallah ta'ala. The other thing is, we talked about immediate family, but also Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about when there is corruption and sin on the earth, it will affect the whole of the community. ظهر الفساد في البر والبحر بما كسبت أيدي الناس. There will verily be fasad, corruption, on the land, on the sea, by what man creates. And by this, what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about is that the actions of man. And when we talk about the fasad, the corruption on the land, the scholars, they said, verily this is talking about highway robbery. Highway robbery. Now, alhamdulillah, we live in London. We don't get, stopped going along the A10 where somebody chops off a tree, puts it on the road, stops the highway robbery. You don't get that. But you go to Pakistan, drive around the hills, common thing. Bangladesh, India, common thing. You get this. Even in the deserts, Arabian deserts, you will get this. People will stop you, block you, and they will take from you, which doesn't belong to you. So, fasad, why? Because of what man wants, craves, wants to take from others. Sinful. And on the sea, the corruption, the scholar said this is about piracy. Piracy, and I believe there's a film that's been out only recently talking about the piracy on the shores of Somalia and so on. Again, being Muslim doesn't give you no excuse to do this. And in fact, they did a documentary to find out why, because sometimes Muslims we're a little bit too sympathetic, because we think, the state of Somalia and the state of this. They look to what these people were doing. That's why we have to honestly be, we have to be just, even if it means upon ourselves, our own community, we have to be just. What they were saying is they looked to the people who were doing this piracy. It's not because of hunger or need and so on. A lot of these guys, it became a culture. The village, the one member from the village started to do piracy, to reap the benefit, another member did, and in the end they were driving around in those areas with Mercedes. So it wasn't because there's a need to feed and so on, because we know even in the time of famine, in the Islamic state, one of the things that they stopped was the punishment of theft. Because people could not find anything to eat. So they found a piece of bread that belonged to someone else and they ate it, fine. Necessity. But for example, the piracy we see, which is quite sophisticated, involves harm to business, as well as lives as well, and as well as terrifying people. So this is not sanctioned. But is this because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said no? Because of what man does. The sins that he does. And this is why one of the things we have to do as a principle in Islam is command good, forbid evil. Command good when it's absent, and forbid the evil when we see it. And we have to be just when we do this. We can't be just emotional. Just can't be emotional. Rather, we need to be fair and just, even if it means against our own community. Inshallah ta'ala. We're going to conclude on that, inshallah ta'ala. The topic was about the effects of sin. Obviously a very big topic. Maybe some of it touched the chord or so on, maybe it didn't. If I didn't mention a point you wanted to speak about, by all means you're welcome to ask me. But just to put it in perspective, the reason I spoke about this topic is because as Muslims, we believe that there's a purpose why we're here, and that there's the results of our actions, we will see the effect of it on the day of judgment when we are counted. I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the tawfiq to be amongst those that benefit from our time in the dunya, as well as benefit from our actions out there. أقول قولي هذا أستغفر ولكم ولسائر المسلمين كل ذنب فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. Thank you for listening.